Hello and welcome to As the Dinosaurs Turn. So Jack got back from his big school trip that had been on everybody's mind for several months. And we asked if he wanted to talk to us, and he declined the opportunity. So we're just going to talk about his trip.
Well, honestly, one of the things is that we actually had to force Jack to go on this trip. I said, yes, it's going to be great. You're going to have a great time. It's travel. You should do all these things. And he didn't want to go because he's such a homebody and an introvert. So I think there was a big, I was nervous about how it would go given that he didn't want to go in the first place. And when you make Jack do something and he doesn't want to do it, he gets kind of teenage angsty, which... Anyway, so I was concerned about that, but it was funny, the lead up to it, everybody was like, oh, Jack's going to be gone for a few days, right? So everybody was, it literally was, Tyler was talking about it. Mm-hmm. Like, I've never been away from Jack for that long. It was so sad. I'm so worried. And, am I going to be able to sleep without him kind of thing? So.
But I guess it went well.
It seems to have. He went and, took a couple of pictures. He forgot to take more. But he took pictures of things that were important to him, like his favorite neighborhoods that we were in on our first trip to Lisbon. The one of the big football stores, on the main drag. So I think those were the big things that he was excited about.
And they stayed at a hostel. He had a few roommates. That all seemed to go okay also.
Yeah, they stayed in a group of 4. And they were staying in a Posada de Juventud. So it's definitely just for youth and youth groups. And things were starting to pick up because I guess the International Day of Youth is being held in Lisbon. Oh. And so they were going to stay there too. So there was a little bit of overlap going on, but they had a great time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, good. I think it was good for him to go and do something with his classmates.
What I do love, though, is I gave him money and I said, go, have fun. Here's for your meals and stuff. When you find things you like, buy them. And what did he do?
He bought stuff for all the rest of us and nothing for him.
Yes. So he bought presents for everyone, including buying a birthday present for Tyler, whose birthday is in a couple of weeks or a month, basically, but Tyler's making it sound like it's like tomorrow. So, but he didn't spend any money on himself. Nothing. It was just, I don't know. He's a pretty sweet kid.
Yeah. Well, I think that, so because he's repeating 9th grade, he gets to go again. Well, I guess even if he didn't repeat, is it something they do for like 9th, 10th, and 11th every year?
I think 9th, 10th, and 11th can go on a trip every year, and this time they were all going to the same place, but 9th was like they stayed with their class. But yes, he can go every year on this trip, and he has had the conversation of like, do I have to go next year? And I'm like, I think travel is a good thing no matter how old you are. And this was his very first experience. It was really important for me that he got to do this. He just turned 15. And the very first time that I got to leave the country was with my Spanish class when I was, in high school and was 15 or 16. And I thought it completely changed my life. It doesn't sound like his was life-changing. But he did have a great time.
Of course, we don't know if it was life-changing. And with you seem to have transcendental experiences with things and have a decisiveness about things that maybe he didn't have this time. But we'll see.
I think that we'll see how it goes. He's processing. He was glad to come home. His feet really, really hurt. That was the big thing because they walked a ton. And there are a couple of places he wants us to all go again.
Well, that's a good sign that there's places he wants to see again.
I think that's a good sign. I mean, he's not going to spill his soul and tell us all of his deepest thoughts. That's not that kind of kid.
Well, we've been in Lisbon in November, and we went back again a few weeks ago, late June or I guess it was early July. And we did more of the touristy things in November, and when we were there personally last time, a few weeks ago, we did more quieter things, I guess.
We did what the kids wanted to do, which was very much, go to the mall and do relaxation things. But I think that him going on a trip and staying at a youth hostel and then even having to figure out dinner on his own one evening, even though they went to a mall that's nearby so people could be in a contained place, very smart of them. And, going on this little bit of an adventure, I think it was a good taste. So we'll see what we can how we can help him expand his horizons in the future.
So they drove there on a bus, right? And so it was a road trip from... Well, if you heard clunking in the background...
Good job, Leo.
That was the cat jumping down from his perch he sits on the stone wall over that direction, and he jumped down and knocked some stuff off. So...
He's got good timing. It was a road trip, bus trip. Thankfully, everybody had their own kind of seats so they could spread out a little bit more, which was nice on their bus. And there were 2 buses in total that went for the 9th graders. And so I think that was nice that everybody had their own space. I do have to say that he said they got there and they went to Oceanarium, which is the aquarium, and he thought that was brilliant and wonderful. But the walking tour on day 2, where they walked the entire city of Lisbon, about killed him. He's like, my feet burn. If you've walked a lot when you're on a trip, your feet burn. And it's not like they took breaks and aired their feet and relaxed and sat at cafes like you should every 45 minutes or so. But so he said his feet really burned and that he just wasn't sure if he was going to be able to do it. At that same time, though, one of the things I really appreciate was that he kept going. I mean, he didn't just be like, nope, I'm done. So that's a good sign too, because we've not always had that experience.
That's true.
So he kept going, and at least it sounds like some of the kids started asking him questions about the U.S. and what school was like there and why he's here. And because it's Portugal, and because what they learn in the news, is about school shootings in the U.S., they all asked him if they came because his school had gone, as he said, gone pew pew, because they didn't know how to say school shootings. And he said, no, his school hadn't. I'm like, did you explain that schools in the area had? And he's like, no. He's like, it's fine. But they were interested in getting to know him a little bit more. And so that, I think, was a good thing for him, too. So
what else have we been up to recently? And I guess
I think intensive Portuguese classes.
Holy we're all taking Portuguese. All 4 of us are.
Yeah, we are. And how is your Portuguese class going?
It's going okay. I can identify words and make out what sentences are saying. It's still a struggle to form the words to say back in response to things, though.
Yeah. But you're not even halfway through your class, right? You go all the way through the middle of August, so You've got time. I've got 4 more classes left in my B1.1 level, and I was feeling really good about myself. I was like, oh, you had to write it, language teacher. You have to write a conversation, and you had to write a conversation about you lose your identity documents and you need to get new ones. I'm like, this is a great applied real life scenario. I'm like, I've got this. And I was very proud of myself. I even sent it to my heart sister, Jessie, to say, hey, look what I did, because she has learned Portuguese, although be it Brazilian Portuguese, she thought it was brilliant. And then I was pissed, which was ironic, but why was I so upset?
You got it sent back to you by the instructor telling you that you were too Spanish.
And I needed to make the corrections. Oh, and two Spanish means that I created very complex sentences that I didn't have to make creative, complex sentences. There's nothing grammatically wrong with them. She just thought that it would be a better way to say it another way. If you're Portuguese, you would say it this way. Shock. I'm too Spanish. It's never going to change. At the same time, I just simplified things. I did the dumbed down kind of letter conversation about these are the things that we've been up to. I had another writing assignment where I had to write 70 to 90 words about what things we've been doing in our life in Portugal. So I just talked about our travels and the things we've done and the things we've seen. And then I wound up writing like 150, 160 words. And so I took out of that 150, 160, 90 words and sent it to her. And then I sent the letter to my friend to say, hey, here's what's been going on. We'll see what happens when I get that one back.
I think the main purpose of these classes for us is mainly to just get a little better, I guess. And well,
That's his purpose.
I could see you going on to get a degree, and who knows, maybe more than just a degree. But for me, it's more being able to go into the grocery store on my own and not feel overwhelmed
or not have a panic attack when I drop you off at the dentist.
Yeah, right.
Say, I'm not going in. Bye. I'm not holding your hand anymore.
Luckily, at least the administrative people at the dentist's office can speak sort of English.
Sort of, yeah.
So I did okay at the dentist's office, but
well, the things I've noticed and the most difficult things are there are prepositions and articles you've got to put everywhere. It's like, let's just sprinkle these all over the place. And I'm like, why? Why do you need all of those things? That makes no sense. Like, no other Romance language I've learned needs as many articles and prepositions and it's all over.
Like if you say 152, it's 150 and 2, and there's no shortcut on that. You have to say the entire thing.
So what I do love is that this is what they've taught us, and I know they've taught us this because it is completely correct. That is the standard, the gold standard of what you're supposed to do. Not one local that I have met does this. So even at the grocery store, when I give like my NIF number, and I'm now into giving it in the hundreds instead of, first I started number by number, and then I moved up to like let's doing it in double digits. Now I'm into let's doing it 3 at a time. When they repeat it back to me, they never use ands everywhere. Right? So it's one of those things that this is what you're supposed to do that no human being does, right?
Right.
I love it. So, but I'm just wondering, literally, I think that the prepositions and the articles are required for everything. So you can't just say my dog, right? You have to say the my dog. I'm like, okay, I can do that. But then if you say that you are buying something for the my dog, for and the connect, and then they create this contraction, and you've got to learn all of those. And it's like, whoa. I'm actually kind of having a lot of fun.
I'm sure you are. Some of us are a little bit lower down the ladder, so
I'm just a grammar geek, but I'm like, ooh, it's weird, but I forget them in places when I'm just. And I also, every single time I'm like, we have these conversations, and we do conversational speaking now for an hour of every one of my classes. I can never remember how to say one word in Portuguese every single time. And every time it's different, which I know is part of the language learning process. But this last time, it was instead of também, I say también, which is Spanish. And then she'd correct me. And I'm like, okay, I'm trying so hard. Yeah, I know.
I remember saying this in one of our recordings that didn't get used, but people talk awfully fast.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't know, the other day the repairman came to look at our air conditioner, and you were talking to him, but all I got was and it's like, what on earth? If I had a remote control, though, and could pause time. It's not so much pause to look at Google Translate, although that might be helpful, but it's like, okay, I could pick out some of the words that this person said, and based on the context, probably figure out what they're saying. The problem is that my mind is like 30 seconds in the past on the conversation.
Well, and that's completely normal. I mean, that is completely normal for where you are. You're just at the very beginning of learning. And you have to, like, it's training your brain. There's a reason why they're sending you all those listening activities to do, and you're like, oh, hell if I know. And you have to listen to it over and over and over and over again to pick little things out. It's because you have to train your brain to listen to everything at the speed and the cadence. And so I've already trained my brain, not just for Spanish, but also for French, and then for Latin and for Catalan. And so my brain has been trained really well. Right? And so it's okay. It makes it easier. There are still some things I'll ask, wait a minute, what does this mean? But I think that's a large piece of it. The thing we're learning now, and this makes me very happy. I mean, some of you who are my fellow grammar nerds are going to think this is awesome. Well, I think it's awesome. So in Spanish, if you say, it's impossible that you, like you say that, it's impossible that you and I learn Portuguese, right? You would say that, or it is possible. We'll make it positive. It is possible that you and I learn Portuguese. In Portuguese, you actually say, it is possible to learn we Portuguese. So you make an infinitive and you conjugate on the infinitive. So they have infinitives without conjugations, infinitives with conjugations, and then they have structures which actually move to what they call the conjunctive, which is their subjunctive tense, like we have in Spanish or in French. And so I think that that's just fascinating because no other Romance language has a conjugated infinitive. So Gallego, which is spoken in to Spain, just north of us, they have a conjugated infinitive, but it's because they kind of broke off, they said. This is what my teacher said. I'm like, no, they're really different languages, but that's okay. They share a conjugated infinitive.
So when we were out for a walk, one of our first weekends or first days here, there was that lady, like an older retired lady, walking up the hill better than us.
And literally, I'm saying she's like 85, like little old lady. Wonderful.
And she was able to speak to you in Spanish. I don't know if she was fluent in Spanish, but you could converse with her in Spanish. And a lot of, like our landlord, George, you could talk to him in Spanish.
And he speaks Portuguese back. This is what I thought was interesting because in all of my years of Spanish study, I was told never, ever, ever, ever do this. And I think that this is important to put in mind because yes, like we need to be respectful that Portuguese and Spanish are completely different languages and they are different cultures. And so there is this mistaken of, oh, you're Spanish. No, they are not Spanish. They are Portuguese. However, I worked really hard to try and not speak Spanish until they're like, oh, no, it's fine. I mean, and I think it's because we're in the north. I think it would be different if we were in the south or if we were in Lisbon or if we were closer to the Spanish border, not the northern border, but along the coast, along the border between Spain and Portugal, like over by Cáceres and, all of those places. I think it would be different. And I think it's because that we are living in a part of Portugal where there are a lot of Spanish tourists, but it also used to be Spain. And so that, historically, Portugal ended at the Douro River. So I was like, oh, I don't know. I speak like this mix. And they're like, oh, you speak Portuñol. I'm like, yes, I speak Portuñol. And they're like, no problem. It's totally fine, But I never would have made that presumption because we were, that is not my experience having traveled in the South or having traveled in the Lisbon area prior. That was just a very sticky topic.
Well, one of the topics on our list is where in the world are we? And that we won't talk about all of that here, but how close are we to the border with Spain? It's like 20 minutes, isn't it?
It depends on I think it would be as the crow flies, but remember you've got to go through mountains. And so I think that's the bigger piece of it. So literally it's an hour north, where an hour north, directly north, you are in Spain. and which is wonderful, and I can hardly wait to go and visit. We're 6 hours from Seville, which is our very first priority in life. Yeah, the very first trip we're going to do, Sevilla. Vamos a Sevilla a disfrutar de la vida. Yeah, there's nothing better than a Sevilla night with a tinto de verano and all these other things. But we're close to the border. We're also in a part of Portugal where there's a lot of ecotourism. And ecotourism is really important, and getting outside in nature is part of the general Iberian philosophy of life. You need to be in nature to fulfill and refill your soul. And so there's a lot of that kind of, let's just drive for the weekend and go and do this. Let's just go back and forth. It's also like, when I ask people, what do you do when you go to the Algarve? Are there things you need to see? And they're like, you lay on the beach or you lay on your patio. That's what you do. You don't go see things. I was like, okay, we can do that. So it's also very much of the mindfulness and being just present in nature is enough to fill your soul up. So I'm convinced it's because there are so many Spaniards that are here all the time. And because this also used to be part of Spain. And I would not be surprised if there are people who speak Gallego in parts of this area, particularly as you get closer, like in Camiña up in there. Along the Camino as it crosses into Spain, I'm sure there's a blurring of cultures. Mm-hmm. I can hardly wait to see.
And usage of apps or ways of learning, I guess, before you, without taking classes like we are now. I mean, Tyler and I have done Duolingo, and I kind of have a love-hate relationship with Duolingo. I keep doing it because I think I'm up to 300 and some days of streak, and so you keep doing it to maintain the streak. But I'm not, and Duolingo is good for vocabulary words and to know that sort of stuff, and it maybe helps you with menus and things, but you will not, I anyway was not able to speak using Duolingo.
No, but okay, so caveat here, Duolingo only has Brazilian Portuguese, and so that makes a big difference.
True.
So the listening and all the pronunciations and all of those things are Brazilian Portuguese, which is different. So for instance, something as simple as good day, right? In Portugal you say bom dia, right? But in Brazilian Portuguese, it's bom dia. So it's just very different. Bom dia. And so it's a different sound, and we're learning different words, right? Mm-hmm. So it talks about the dog all the time. I love this. Cachorro, un cachorro, un cachorro. Well, in Portugal, a male dog is a cow.
C-A-O.
Yeah, cow. Un cow. Right? No é un cachorro, é un cow. Right? Uma cadela is a female dog. Right? But if you say you have a cachorro here, they're going to get that it's a dog from context, but that's what you call a hot dog. You don't call an actual animal that. And so there's those things that I think that are important. There are very few apps where you can actually learn Portuguese and do well, however, there are some great YouTube channels that you can watch that I found after we moved, which are not helpful before you move. And that actually is a pretty good resource. Tyler's been excellent at it though. And I think there's something to be said for being that age, being 11, almost 12, and doing language study. It's the same time that I started learning Spanish, and it becomes this superhero power. I tell him it's our superpower, right? So I think that helps. Mm-hmm. But yeah, Duolingo, you definitely keep going for the streak. Tyler goes for the streak. He also goes to make sure that he stays in the class, because you can move into different classes with different trophies. And he also does it to finish the monthly challenge before anyone else. So he's very competitive when it comes to that. Mm-hmm. So he still does it. But he's also, I can tell that there are some things that were helpful. Conjugating verbs, that will be helpful, right? It's the same conjugations. You don't use você, right? Use tu. You can use você, but it's like você would be like the plural instead of the tu form. So I think that there's some similarities. I don't know. It's not easy, though.
No, it's not easy. We'll keep you posted on our adventures on learning the language and how we do with that.
I think, though, that we might even have to record a few conversations with some of our friends in town when you start getting a little more confident.
I tried to say something to the dentist in Portuguese, and everybody just kind of laughed. So that's happened several times when I try to say something. They just they smile. And
Well, that doesn't mean you were wrong. It just means that maybe they're like, oh, your pronunciation or something. But we go to Cyber Cafe. So Cyber Cafe in town. Yeah, a señora. Like I don't even know her real name. We always just call her Bon dia, señora. A señora. She's now making him do all of the orders. And, she's pretty impressed with how you're learning.
I do okay with that.
So I think that having more conversations with her would be good. There are some safe people. Checkout line at the grocery store. There are a couple of people we see there.
Yeah.
So if it's not psychotic, we might be able to see how you do.
I think it's interesting in the town that we live in, there are no English speakers. Like, the fact that we're American is like we're the oddities.
There's some British that come through, but they're not here necessarily all year round.
So it's French, Brazilian. So the Brazilian lives here. French
and
Swiss, and some from Belgium vacation here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I know one of the attendants at the gas station said that they were appreciative that you didn't speak French because someone else before you had come in and only spoke French.
And she's like, my French is like, bonjour, and okay. Like, that's about it. Like, bonjour, that's it. So we laughed about that and had the conversation. But I think that, we are in an ecotourism area. So I think that that's a piece of it. But learning the language is going to take time.
Yep.
And to be fair, he's done it now for like 2 weeks. 2 weeks.
Three or four, actually.
It hasn't been 4. 4 would put you in the middle of...
For a while. I've done it for a while.
All right, there you go. That's the idea. So he's working on it, and I think that's a good thing. After the time I'm done with his B1.1, my plan is to stop. But if they go on to B1.2, I'm going to have to keep going because now we're into the grammar nerd things. Relative pronouns and things. It's just so exciting. I love it. We've already done all of that. We've done the future. We've done the conditional. I'm like, let's get into the complicated. I'm a total nerd.
You are.
Oh, sorry, honey. You married a language nerd.
I knew that.
Well, thank God.
All right, catch us again next time on another episode of As the Dinosaurs Turn.
All right, next time we'll see if we can get him to at least say a few things in Portuguese for you.